hanging on for a minute while we wait for our live streaming to catch up. So sit tight, grab something to drink, and we're going to start our conversation in just a minute. So thanks for joining us. Glad you could take time out of a Thursday night for a little Newsela after hours, whether you're joining us on Zoom or via YouTube Live. We're just streaming here on YouTube and on Zoom. We're trying something new, so we're going to learn as we go, and we're going to get started in just about 30 seconds. So thanks for joining us. This is that moment in the broadcast where the anchor is shuffling their papers and looking around busily as though they're working on something and making notes for tomorrow as they pass the time. So if you're just joining us, thanks for tuning in. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're just waiting for our streaming on YouTube to catch up. And then we're going to get into our program. It's going to be a short discussion, short screening. I think we can just sort of jump to the point and jump right into the film, have a nice debrief, and leave you with something to think about for the rest of the evening. So thanks for taking time to join us. We're using the chat function in Zoom. So if you have comments, please feel free to write in the chat. And if you're joining us on YouTube and you're just catching up to the streaming, feel free to leave comments and we'll work those into our conversation as we get them. So I think we're just about a minute in. Yeah, let us know where you're coming from, where you might be joining from, and what brought you here today. So I'll introduce myself and my conversant, Heidi Hayes Jacobs. We're really pleased to have another conversation again. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, co-founder and chief academic officer. And as I say, I'm really pleased, Heidi, that you could join us. Thanks for being here this evening.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Dan.
So let's dive in. We're going to watch a film. It's a short one. It's 8 minutes. We shot it just a few weeks ago. And I thought before we dive in, just give you a little context on kind of where we're coming from. Why'd we make this film? And then we'll have a little bit of a conversation, Heidi and I. We hope you'll join us with your comments and questions for both of us. So the impetus behind the film is the time that we live in right now, and an exercise we often do at Newsela, which is sort of look ahead into the future. We call it a pre-mortem. Basically, before the event that you're going to dissect, could you imagine, go into the future and imagine what might happen? So a year from now, if we're having a conversation about how it went, we look back on May 2021 and we ask ourselves about the choices that we were faced with and what decisions we made. And we have some regrets. We're not entirely pleased with how things went. And that's the place that we started from. We wanted to explore that space and some of the decisions that we're faced with. And we wanted to use the film to tell a story of teachers and students in this moment, and not with paid actors, but to go into a school district. And we were really lucky that the Centennial School District in Pennsylvania welcomed us in. And it happens, what you'll see was shot on the weekend before the high school reopened for in-person learning just a few weeks ago. It was reopening on Monday, and we were in there Saturday and Sunday with middle schoolers who had been face-to-face and high schoolers who were back in the building for the first time in a year. And you can see, hopefully you'll see this genuine expression of pleasure and ease and the social experience of being back together. And we really wanted to contrast the power of social learning and learning in a social context with what we worry may be the result of decisions that folks feel aren't the best ones, but somehow end up being made in the way that they position the technology and the way that they expect students will learn from it. And we've been asking ourselves a lot of questions about the learning science. And so we're going to come back and revisit some questions about learning science, Dr. Heidi Hayes Jacobs will share a bit of her perspective on what she sees in this film. And we hope you'll share your perspective and write in during the film. Please throw your questions and your reactions. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can write them in the comments. And if you're in Zoom, please write them in the conversation in the chat, and we'll be fielding them. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. So without further ado, it's about 8 minutes. So grab some popcorn and beverage of your choice, and let's dive in and watch this film together.
This year, teachers have worked tirelessly to teach students remotely, yet research shows that the learning gap is continuing to widen.
According to some experts, it is. The average American student has lost up to a year in math and almost as much in reading.
Learning in isolation has been difficult for me. It's different to sit there and not be able to make connections with people, like the one-on-one conversation with your teacher.
Learning in isolation is so tragic that we had to go through it because you're by yourself. There's no social aspect. There's no one around you. It's just you and your thoughts.
With the pandemic, there's a better opportunity now as we head into this new year to see, what was working, what wasn't. All of us as teachers are gonna take this as a challenge to do better, challenge to reach our kids in new ways.
Today, we're going to have kids broken into two groups, the debate class group versus the classroom that I'm teaching in. The students are going to be asked to be on a device, and it's a little bit more self-directed. We're going to start talking about the U.S. government and the Bill of Rights. So I would like for you to please log on to your programs. While I love to be in a classroom with kids, maybe this particular type of situation is not ideal.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Nice to see everyone.
So I'm excited about the exercise we're doing today. I really expect to see my kids involved.
Would you be in favor of a filter that would automatically take away anything that we said, that you posted in all your social media feeds that would possibly cause somebody harm? What I'd like you guys to do is just turn to your neighbor, okay, and discuss a little bit about what you'd feel if a filter like that limited your free speech.
I'd say no, because yeah, that should be off limits.
The next thing we're gonna do is prepare to have a debate. In order to do that, I'm going to put you in groups. While you're in your groups, you're gonna start pulling information from the article and come up with your ideas to back up your argument. I had students in this class that ranged from a 4th grade to a 9th grade reading level. I could not have had this debate without the levels adjusting.
I agree with this statement.
With the other class, I'm a little concerned with what the engagement level is gonna be like.
So I've emailed you all a file with some symbols in it. Could you find that for me? And I'd like you to take a minute to respond to that prompt I've given you.
The format wasn't really how I would prefer to teach.
Get yourselves logged in. And remember, we're going to focus on the civics and government section. You'll do some reading in that tool. You can try out the games and also the little quiz that's in for each of those. And I'm going to give you some time to do some learning.
So basically, one solid point would be that the Founding Fathers made the First Amendment more protected. There should not be any limitations on said freedom of speech, right?
The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in favor of the baker.
I feel like what we need to do, and that's the thing they said here.
So one of the things I look for in class is kids having conversations with each other. If they're taking ownership of the class, if they're taking ownership of the lesson, sitting in groups, writing down notes and their ideas, then I feel like I'm actually getting to them the purpose of the lesson, the purpose of what we're here for.
Izzy, I'm going to start with you. Please stand and give the first part of your argument.
So I believe that freedom of speech should be limited.
In the First Amendment of the Constitution, it clearly states that we have the freedom of speech.
The students, while they interact with each other, are learning and processing.
We are going to focus a little bit extra on the branches. So if you do some work on the branches of government, that would be in its interest. Right, Congress has to approve it. What's up?
There's no next button on here. What do I click?
When students are disengaged, they have a few very typical behaviors. You'll see the phone start to go. And the kids that are really have had enough, you'll start to see the head go a little bit. It happens very quickly.
When government determines what is acceptable on social media, you're limiting the CEOs and the companies' freedom of speech by limiting what can go on their platforms.
In response to Jamar, you have people from other countries that do not have the right of freedom of speech.
Why be forced to pick one option when there's multiple available?
So going off your original rebuttal, say we decide, all right, let's restrict freedom of speech.
It's because I want this world to be a safe place.
But the people need to know the truth in order to see the
main
truth.
idea is that if it causes or leads to clear
and present danger to U.S. security.
The belief that we were trying to take away factual information away.
It should be allowed for government to establish communication limitations.
They cannot be protected under the First Amendment because they are run by a private company.
Both teams here did a really good job.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
How boring was that class?
Well, I didn't even know what I was learning.
Ooh, today was not our most excellent day in the classroom.
You should take this discussion home.
That was wild.
Yeah, we go, guys.
Thank you, have a good one.
See you guys later.
Connection is truly one of the most valuable things a classroom can have. And I think that having a connection with the teacher and the students is magical.
I feel what I had today was a great class because of the connections I built with my not only peers, but with the teacher as well.
If I had to describe my class today in one word, it would probably be boring.
Something like skill and drill is not, it's not effective because it takes things out of context for students.
This program today was not the way I would typically teach. We as teachers are often concerned that our names are connected to our kids' names for state testing, and these programs might be okay to try to address some of those needs, but it doesn't meet the whole student.
We see that they have struggled in this past year. Having them come back in the classroom, I want them to feel like we're here for them. We're gonna get you there. We're gonna get you seeing the purpose in school, the purpose in reading, the purpose in finding out who you are.
I do wish I was in the other class.
So Heidi, we've been, I introed this by sort of situating it in the times we live in, and we've been hearing a lot of language around learning loss, remediation, intervention. I wonder, just as you're hearing these terms get bandied about, what's your reaction? What kind of impact do you think that language is having on the moment?
Actually, there's been a tremendous focus on the phrase learning loss, and there's almost like a debate about it. Recently, I read a marvelous article by Young Zhao on the trap of learning loss. Then I read an article in the New York Times about the reality that we have what are called sliders. There really are a lot of kids who have just slid out and tuned out, and we have a genuine problem. We also know there's been learning gain, that some students thrived. You know, the interesting thing about the film is it's very much about connection. But, you know, right now I feel very connected to you and I'm working virtually. It isn't out of the question to work in that way. But I think the biggest question is going to be helping these students who really did make a fall off the precipice, and how we can support them, because it's both an emotional issue as well as an academic one. It's very much on people's minds.
Mm-hmm. And so in your own experience and from the research that you've done, like what sort of things do you think are the sort of the directions that are going to be most beneficial to the greatest number of students, as we're talking about like students coming back from a range of experiences right now?
Yes, actually, Allison Zamuda and I put out a blog post on this called Portrait of a Right Now, Profile of a Right Now Learner. And I think one of the things, ironically, we still have time to do is to actually slow down. And we need to ascertain a lot more and do a lot more listening and focus with learners themselves and with parents about what the experience has been this year, and teachers who have gone through tremendous fatigue in preparation for how we're going to renegotiate the entry of school. I think we can't go back to school. We're going to have to go forward, and a combination of, okay, some degree of assessment, that perhaps some testing will be appropriate, but I think we don't want to overemphasize that. It really won't show us what we need. So we put out some protocols for actively engaging and finding out better perceptions of what our students need, as well as really looking more at some of the formative assessments and demonstrations that would be quite revealing, and students' ability to self-navigate and self-direct. So I think those are some of the things we should be considering now in preparation for the fall.
Well, I just want to bring in the voices of a couple of our audience members. Someone's reacting to forward to school, that phrase instead of back to school, and a couple of greetings that we're getting from around the world, really. Would love to know what your questions are and your reactions. Heidi, you were talking about listening to students, and the other day when we were watching the film and talking about it in preparation for this evening, I was connecting a piece of research that we'd read from the Gallup poll that was conducted from 2009, 2016. They collected 5 million data points from 3,000 different schools across the country, effectively showing that the more time students are spending in school from grade 5 through grade 12, the lesser the rates of engagement that they feel. It's like basically half as engaged by the time they're ready to leave school. And you were making a comment about literacy and on the topic of listening to students. I wonder if you could just say a little bit about your thoughts there, and how we listen, how much we listen, how much voice students have in secondary education in particular.
Yeah, I think what I also remember and what I call attention to from the film was that the contrast was actually kids were talking and listening to one another in one set, and in the other, they were focused on a screen. I absolutely believe you could have a terrific experience focused on reading a book or on a screen. That isn't the point. But at some point, what we want to do is ensure that students actually develop the confidence to hear themselves speak to others and to genuinely listen to others. And what I know about literacy is that with reading, writing, speaking, listening, which we often rattle trippingly off the tongue, they should be in the reverse order, because when you acquire a language, you start by listening, then you go to speech, then you go to playing with clay, writing, and reading. And the older kids get, you're quite right, the quieter classrooms get. That is not true in some other countries. That the emphasis on definitely better communication helps them express themselves about their feelings, about their ideas, and quite frankly, how can I ask a question if I don't know the words, if I can't find them? So I'd be elevating, especially into next year, a lot more time on the kind of interaction you're talking about. We need it. They need it so much.
Well, there's a question, someone's reading our minds here. Reginald's writing into the question. I think he's familiar with some of your work, asking how are school systems that are already successful, like in Finland, approaching the going forward from this moment? You're laughing. What could you say? I'm
laughing because we just published today, and I put another blog post up about Finland. I do, Reginald, wherever you are, hello. The one interesting thing, and let's mention Finland, that they do that's very important is one thing they do is they organize very differently than we do. And so they're oriented in very much of a community model where students start school at the age of 7, but they're in a group, the same group with the same group of teachers for several years. So they become much more intimate. There's a lot more conversation that is expected, and they're more oriented to that. So one thing that happens is if I'm in a schedule that has me moving 40 minutes in rows, just be quiet, listen to the teacher, don't listen to each other, you kind of get what you design. So I think part of it are the conditions for more community and more interaction. And because a big part of being literate is speaking and listening, I would be ramping that up big time, a lot more.
And this is, several of our attendees are offering perspectives on this. Gabriel writing in saying education needs to be a humanistic experience. And Ryan commenting that peer interaction is a major factor, both socially and developmentally. And this is, you were talking about the design, I would say, one of the sort of blockers and obstacles that institutions introduce in the way that we've talked about it at Newsela, they introduce to students engagement. The students are able to find engagement themselves. When students, let's say people organize a game themselves, they're playing that game to be engaged. And if they have written rules for themselves in the game that leave them feeling a little bit bored, then they don't linger in that very long. They change the rules. They say, like, let's try this now and let's try that now and see what's more engaging. But an institution comes along and says, you get 40 minutes for this subject, you get 40 minutes for that, and it's time to move along. And there's lots of obstacles. So given, the reality of institutions, that we're going forward to school, back to school, somehow we're going to find ourselves in a building, maybe to both Ryan's and Gabriel's points, how do you jumpstart that social and developmental kind of experience for students? What would be some of the kind of look-fors that a designer, a principal, rethinking, like, we're going to go back to school and I really want students to have more social time. I want them to be working, listening to each other, maybe as like we heard in the video. What are some ways to think about doing that, working that into the learning?
There's a lot of layers in your question, and that's fine. There's a lot of layers to what's going on. It strikes me that one of the most important things that leaders have to do is to absolutely message that you're not going to go and recover what you have. Recovery is not what we need. Recovery is rebuilding when something has been knocked down. You need to think about this as an opportunity to reset, to really refresh what's going on. You said, what can be the impetus? The pandemic has been the impetus. And quite honestly, I've been working with leadership teams in a number of states over the last 6 to 8 weeks on this very question. And a lot of people get this, that there's just been, we don't even know the half of what we've all been through, and we're not through it yet. The reality is there's 2 agenda items here that need to be overlapped. And one is the program itself, the curriculum itself, the learning experiences. It seems to me we should be putting on the table the most essential. The questions are, what are we going to cut, keep, and create? We can't try to cover everything. We need to cut out some of the extraneous, get more of that involved, and make it much more co-created with our learners, get their investigations as part of it. But the other is what we were just talking about. And to me, that's really the most important challenge right now. And that is the format of school is really going to hinder everything. It always has. It was before the pandemic. Now it will make it worse. And that is old style self-containers, one teacher, one group of kids. The isolation and the rigidity of schedules is an absolutely perfect recipe for hitting the wall. We need to be much more responsive. So the questions that I would pose to an administrator might be, given who your kids are, what type of grouping pattern, and that includes the teaming of your teachers, how might we group your students? What type of schedule might give you a little more flex time so that you really can help them socially and emotionally, humanely, as one of the people mentioned, and also academically. Otherwise, we're gonna slip back into that factory model just as sure as you can imagine.
And this is, personally, this is something that worries me deeply, as does with many others, that this sort of deficit orientation around backfilling what we missed and misdiagnosing, some of the real challenges that we face, as though we want to get back to where we were, without taking this as an opportunity to really reimagine and question some of the assumptions. When we look at test scores, we think the answer is, let's raise the test scores by, let's get those numbers up. And I think what we're discounting is the the power that we will face when students disengage, and overcoming disengagement will jeopardize whatever hope we had of reaching them with our best intentions for learning, but a misguided understanding of how they actually learn.
I think that is so true. I think that if the standardized testing becomes punitive, it's like kids are going to go, look, hasn't the pandemic punished us enough? Can't I get back and feel? Here's something I've been reading, a real interesting book by Floyd Crabb and John Crownapple called Belonging Through Dignity. And what I think kids are going to need is this sense of belonging, not punishment. And there's a way to assess that isn't so old style and so restricted on what we learn. I think you're right, Dan, I do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest concerns, is that students will show up if they're forced to come to a summer learning offering. I think that sets the wrong tone. We want them to show up, but if they show up and they're not greeted and welcomed, and it's not an experience that reinforces their belonging, it assesses them, finds them lacking, even decides before they arrive that they're lacking, and treats them with that sort of orientation, it's going to turn them off. And they've already discovered what they can do with their time over the last year that isn't being in a school building. And they know that there's another choice out there, and families know that there's another choice. They may not want it, but they certainly don't want their child to experience the feeling of feeling like they're just every day working from a deficit and not being honored for who they are.
You know, I mentioned to you, we just published a blog post on this. There's a marvelous district in Appalachia, Carter County Schools, and the name of our blog post, because it's what they call it, is Cool Summer School. They are just taking the opposite view. They're saying this is an opportunity, and they are going to integrate summer school with studies right there in the mountains of Appalachia. How many of you have heard the Appalachian Trail? I mean, it's gorgeous where they are. How smart is that? But we don't all live near the mountains or a beach, but you can begin to connect, like we saw in the film, with your community, with learning about what people went through the pandemic. I know of a school that's going to do that. They're going to document, almost create their own artifacts, a gallery of what the experience has been. I think that's so smart. It's engaging students in the immediacy of their own experience. It's actually phenomena-based learning. It's emergent. We need to take the kids where they are, and also we need to think of our teachers who are fatigued. They need an opportunity to get an injection of energy and feel more connected themselves to one another and the kids and to their work.
And that co-creation, I think, is vital. And so this is a point that Reginald is just asking about, is communicating this message or vision for learning. And I think you're sort of speaking to this asset-oriented, I think it's bringing the community along and saying, we know you care for your kids, we care for your kids. Here is our theory. Here is the basis on which we're taking action. And it's our beliefs, research-based beliefs on how people learn and how we're planning to put those beliefs and that research into action. And it's not about teaching to the test. We want to help them develop literacy, math, core academic skills. We are headed in that direction. Here is our plan to get there. And I think the longer that silence is deafening, the longer that the communities wait to hear the plan and the why, not just the what, but the why, the more assumptions they'll make.
I have one slightly a different angle on that, but I agree with that. And it's this notion of listening right now. The schools we're working with, one I was just working with recently, we did a listening tour of parents. If you want to announce this, don't go announce something. Listen for a while. Listen to the kids. Listen to the teachers. Listen to the parents. Then you can begin to explain, because there's more trust. I'm concerned that people are going to just march through and say, this is what we're doing to your kids. And the parents will feel as victimized as the students.
That's a great point.
It's important to take it in. Thank you.
That's a great point. Yeah, this is a conversation with the community, not a broadcast, not a one-way communication. Very well taken. So we've been talking about all the moment that we're in. We've watched this film that sort of captured a rendering of it. we promised a short conversation, and we'll want to keep it short because, you know, you're joining us, as I've been saying, like Newsela after hours. We hope you're going to share this film. We hope you can have conversations with your colleagues, with your community about it. What work does the film do for you? Does it help you surface tensions? Does it help you surface a fork in the road and the decision that you're faced with, the tension around you want students to gain in their academic skills, and we all want that, but the reality of the peril you face with welcoming them back in a way that causes them to disengage. And once they've disengaged, you won't get it back. So really would welcome everyone to have those conversations in your communities. Share the conversations that you have with us. Please tweet at us or follow us on Instagram. Let us know what these conversations sound like in your community. And visit Newsela's website, learningfound.com, to learn more about this campaign. Help us have these conversations in your communities, and let us learn from you. So Heidi, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you.
Thanks. And to our audience, thanks for taking a little bit of your precious time. We hope this was helpful, and we'll see if we can convene other conversations like this after hours and during the day. So with that, we're going to sign off and wish you the best. Heidi, great to see you. And to our audience, thanks for joining us. Have a good evening, everyone.